The heavy gray Atlantic mist rolled silently across the jagged shores of Roanoke Island in the late August of 1587, swallowing the fragile wooden silhouettes of the newly constructed English settlement. Governor John White stood on the muddy shoreline, tightly holding his daughter's trembling hand as the massive wooden hull of the returning supply ship anchored in the deep, dark waters behind him. The colony of over 100 men, women, and children had been left on this isolated, unfamiliar edge of the world, tasked with building a permanent home under the permanent shadow of the ancient, towering wilderness. Food supplies were dangerously low, winter was rapidly approaching, and an unyielding, silent psychological dread had already begun to settle over the small community. White promised his family that he would return from England within 9 months with fresh provisions, tools, and soldiers to secure their survival against the unseen anomalies of the deep woods. As the sails of his ship vanished into the gray horizon, the colonists retreated behind their wooden palisades, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth, leaving them completely isolated in a vast, unpredictable continent. However, the unexpected outbreak of the Anglo-Spanish War completely paralyzed the Atlantic shipping routes, trapping John White in Europe for 3 agonizing years while his mind remained frozen in fear for the fate of his abandoned family. Every single night, he stared into the dark European waters, imagining the quiet desperation of his people on that lonely American island, praying that their fires were still burning amidst the encroaching shadows. When the war finally subsided in the summer of 1590, White managed to secure a passage back to the New World, his heart racing with intense anxiety as the familiar outline of Roanoke Island slowly emerged from the dense morning fog. The ship's crew fired several heavy cannons into the air to signal their dramatic arrival, but the loud explosions were met with an absolute, unnatural silence that seemed to suffocate the entire coastline. No smoke rose from the chimneys, no flags were waving on the fort walls, and not a single human voice echoed from the dark tree-line. John White and a small group of armed sailors stepped onto the deserted beach, their leather boots sinking into the wet sand as they cautiously advanced toward the main settlement area. The heavy wooden gates of the colony's defensive fort stood wide open, swaying slowly in the cold autumn wind with a low, rhythmic creak that intensified the team's growing panic. As the men crossed the threshold into the village, they were struck by a scene of pure, unexplainable desolation that resembled a frozen moment in time. Every single house was completely empty, yet there were absolutely no signs of a violent struggle, no traces of blood on the grass, and no damaged structures that would indicate an attack by local tribes or foreign invaders. The heavy iron cooking pot still hung over cold, black ash, personal leather boots and woolen clothing were left resting neatly in the bedrooms, and valuable tools were piled quietly in the corners of the workshops. It appeared as though the entire population of over 100 souls had simply stood up in the middle of their daily routines and walked directly into the ancient forest without taking a single belonging with them. The search party searched every abandoned structure for hours, their voices growing hoarse as they called out the names of loved ones into the empty, echoing rooms of the settlement. Suddenly, near the main entrance of the fort, John White stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes locking onto a massive, weathered wooden post that formed part of the main defensive wall. Deeply and frantically carved into the solid timber were the 5 mysterious letters spelling out the single word, Croatoan, with no other markings or explanations left behind. A cold, suffocating realization settled over the governor as he traced the rough edges of the carved letters with his fingers, knowing that this cryptic word was the only physical remnant of his entire family's existence. The search was ultimately cut short by a violent tropical storm that threatened to tear the supply ship from its anchors, forcing the broken, grieving governor to permanently abandon the island. For centuries, the ultimate fate of the lost colonists remained one of history's most terrifying mysteries, an unexplainable disappearance that defied every logical explanation. The dark forest eventually reclaimed the empty streets and decaying wooden houses of Roanoke, leaving behind only the whisper of a single word carved into a dying tree, a permanent reminder of the fragile human lives that can be instantly dissolved into the vast, silent shadows of the wilderness.